Hello, Max NG7M here, and I always start these videos off with that. Hi, this is Max NG7M. Anyway, this is a video I've been meaning to do for a long time, and it's my own opinion, but I wanted to delve into a fairly detailed setup for FSK, frequency shift keying, using the internal FSK on an Elecraft K3 or Elecraft K3S. And so I've got a couple cameras set up here, and I'm gonna take it, starting off with just the basics. We're only going to deal with MMTTY. We're going to use that as the decoder and software that will drive FSK and the PTT on an Elecraft K3. Anytime I say K3, I mean K3S. The radio in the demo is a K3S that I'll have a camera on. But I want to go through starting off with just kind of the basics, not get into any logging software, but I'll end up using N1MM Plus with MMTTY, and then we'll see how far this goes. I'm going to try to do it in one take here. So we'll download MMTTY. This is all on the Windows 10 here, 64-bit version of Windows 10. And I'll just walk you through the basic setup and kind of go from there. And I hope everybody finds this useful. I do find myself repeating this or doing a team viewer session into friends of mine that need help getting things set up, because everybody always wants to actually do FSK. So there's three things I want to talk about at the start here. And let me make myself a little smaller here, and I'll turn on my desktop if I got the software going here. So here's my desktop. You've got me down in the lower right hand corner, so you don't have to look at me too much. And I'm going to pull up the most sophisticated presentation software I know of, which is WordPad. And I have a really clicky keyboard here. So let's get WordPad here, and this is I'm going to pull this in the middle. We'll do it. We'll be really fancy here. I'm gonna jump in and use a big old font here. Come down, and there's three things I want to talk about. Just kind of break it down. FSK keying of any HF radio, for that matter, that supports internal frequency shift keying of the mark and shift tones. This would apply to, but I have got to stick with the radio I have, and that's an Elecraft. So there's kind of three things we're going to go through besides downloading MMTTY and configuring it on its own without any logging software. And these are the three things I want you to keep in mind. It really comes down to this. You need to, number one, receive RTTY off the air, right? So you've got to set up your sound card, whether that's a built-in sound card in a K3S or an external sound card on your computer. You've got to get the audio from your receiving antenna in the rig, demodulated, whatever. You've got to pump it out into the microphone input. So we're gonna, number one, we're gonna set up and make sure that we can receive I before C except after I before E except after C, right? Receive audio in MMTTY. So that's the first thing we're gonna do. The next thing we need, so once we've got that going, and you can tune in to an RTTY signal and see the print in your software, MMTTY in this case, the next two things we need to do is have that same software, number two, control PTT, push to talk. We've got to have a way for the software to switch the rig into push to talk. I guess you could use a foot switch if you want, or we're focused on FSK here, internal to a rig. I'm not going to get into using AFSK or audio FSK. So that's number 2. We got to control PTT. And then number 3, which really gets confusing to a lot of guys, it seems like. Yeah, this may be boring if you're very familiar with this, but we have to tell the transceiver how to shift between a mark and the shift tones of an FSK signal. And so we can do that with a simple switch. And in the case of the K3, which is very popular, you use a serial line, and if it's a USB serial line, it's an FTDI. Typically you want an FTDI chipset, USB serial port, or it can be a a standard PCIe serial port, multi-serial port output. I mean, I don't mean to digress into the details there, but we've got to tell the rig with the on-off switch. That's all this is doing. We're not generating any tones. We're not generating the mark and the shift. We're just going to use an on-off switch, in effect, to tell the K3, K3S when to generate a mark tone and a shift tone. So we need to configure a serial port to act. I'm making this up as I go, as a single pole, single throw switch, right? It's an SPST switch. We're literally just going to have, it's like binary, on or off. And whether on is the mark tone or off is the shift tone, we won't worry about. But those are the 3 things we're going to do to do true FSK at the transmitter level, transceiver in this case. We're going to receive. We've got to put the radio into transmit, and then we have to tell the internal FSK capability of the radio how to switch between the mark tone and the shift tone. So there's the big presentation. 1, 2, 3. Now, I wish it was easy as 1, 2, 3, but there's a little setup that's going to go on. So I'm going to minimize that, pull up a browser, and again, I'm kind of making this up as we go. I think I can zoom in here. This might help a little bit. I'm going to zoom in, get a bigger browser going here. And if I just search for download TTY, we should get the MMTTY MMTTY soft site. And not too long ago, a version 1.7 was released. And so that's what we want to get. So here I've got this big, hopefully you can see this just fine here. So we're going to download the full version here. And let's see, make my window a little smaller here so I can see it, the bottom of it. So here I'm going to download it. I'm just going to run that install. I'm making this up. Hopefully it'll let me install it again because I probably already have it installed. Okay. So here we've got the setup. I accept the agreement. And I'm actually going to install it here. But I'm going to put it in a directory called MMTTY, MMTTY1. Because I'm actually going to install 2 copies. And if I have time and I don't lose interest here too quick, I'll show you how to do a single radio 2 VFO RTTY with the K3 with N1MM plus. So this instance I'm going to install right there. And we're just going to create a desktop shortcut, which I won't use. I'm just going to browse there and run it. And we're not going to launch it here. I just want to show you where that was installed. So if I unzoom here, come back. So now, in theory, right, I can pull up a file explorer here. I guess I could make myself a little bigger for some of this. Not that, you're probably focused on me, not the desktop here. Okay, so come over here. We're going to zoom in again. I'm going to go to, it created the directory right there, ham. So I'm browsing drive C here on my Windows 10 desktop. So it created MMTTY. MMTTY1 is where I installed that. So here's the default downloads that you get with MMTTY. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to do step number 1. We're going to configure a K3S to receive off the air our RTTY so we can see the print on the screen. So that's goal number 1. So I'm actually going to, and it's one reason that I decided to do this was the BART G is going on right now. I've got a few more hours of the BART G, so there's lots of signals on the air, and I'll show a pan adapter spectrum display, and hopefully we'll have a little eye candy going on here if you can see everything. Okay, so I'm going to run MMTTY. Here's the executable. Forget N1MM plus, forget DXLab, forget whatever logging software you use. Let's just focus on the software. This is kind of like the benchmark for Windows-based operating system doing RTTY, whether AFSK or FSK. I'm not getting into AFSK. Never used it. I've only done FSK. So anyway, back to the screen here. I'm going to run this. And so we get and this doesn't matter, just put your call sign in, NG7M, and I just want to double check. I'm going to minimize this. I want to double check to make sure we're looking pretty good here. Yeah, it looks like it. So I might be covering myself up when I zoom in. So we'll zoom back in, and ooh, do I dare to go that big? Let's see. So here we're in MMTTY. I think I'm going to go out a little bit right there. And the first thing I'm going to do is leave everything default for now. I think if you look at the MMTTY help, they have you turn on the UOS. Why is that escaping me right now? Undo something on shift, I think. Anyway, you can click that. Don't worry about it. One thing to take note here, though, is by default, MMTTY has the mark tone at 2125 Hertz and the shift at 170 Hertz. And so before we get going here, most guys like to listen to lower tones. So I'm going to zoom out. So the only thing we've done here is started up MMTTY, click the UOS, and I'm going to find this out, and it's really bugging me. Why? MMTTY, UOS. Why can't I remember that option? It is, let's zoom in here. So it seems like there's a quick start here. Quick start. Where is that? UOS. Okay, unshift on space, that's right. So if you look at the MMTTY setup, basically they're telling you the same thing. I mean, you can spend a lot of time getting into the details here, but just select the UOS and none of the other buttons. There, I took care of that. The next thing we want to do is, even before I get to the mark tone and the shift tone, I'm going to check my radio. So I'm going to unzoom out here. I'm actually going to turn on, I've got another camera on my K3 here. So here you go. You can see my hand. You can see my left hand, and it magically appears over here on the radio. So if we're in CW here, I don't know if you can see the mode here, CW, we want to switch the K3 or K3S into digital data mode. So now we're on data, you can see right there, data on the screen, and I might be able to make that a little bit bigger. And the data mode, so I'm on 20 meters here, you can see, any of you guys that have been around the block, you'll know I have the higher tones on right now, because that's what I want to show setting up before we get back to MMTTY. So I've got the audio down, RF's all the way up right now, the AF's down. Make sure you're in data mode, not in split or anything else. I've got a filter at 500 hertz filter. A lot of times I go down to 400, whatever you prefer. Some will claim that you get better reception at a little bit wider, right? The selectivity. Anyway, I'm digressing all over the place. The main thing I wanted to do was get into the data mode. So I'm in data, but we need to go to the AFX button here on the K3, and we're going to hold it in to get the data mode. And so the data mode right now is FSK digital, which we want. You know, if you have it, so the VFO B knob will switch between the different modes. So we want to kick it into, because we're going to be doing FSK, we're going to be big boys, putting on our big boy pants, and we're going to have the K3 transmit in FSK later on, because it's going to create some of the purest FSK you can get with the later versions of the K3. It's been a number of years now, but anyway, it puts out a nice FSK RTTY signal. So you want to switch to FSK D, and the bits per second 45, and there are some contests that do 75, but we want 45. There's only like 1 or 2 contests. But we want 45 bits per second and FSKD, and so then I hit the AFX button again to get out of there. The next thing we want to do is set up what tones we want the radio to decode on. And by default, I think it's the 2175. So if we go over here on the spot button, it says pitch down below there, hold the button in, and it switches. You're going to have to, I don't know if I can shut this down, but hopefully you can hear me over the tones there. By default, it's 2125 Mark and a 170 hertz shift. Most guys prefer the lower tones, including me. You can pick what you want. Oh, you go to the left there so you can hear them. So the lower tones are a little easier on the ears, but whatever you think is wonderful, you can pick. So we're going to configure the K3S here to 915 and 170, and I got to turn that off so it doesn't drive me crazy. So we've got the mark tone at 915, the shift tone at 170, and so now we're done on the K3. Now I'm going to assume you're already hooked up to a band and that kind of good stuff, right? You know, an antenna and everything else. So let's come back to, I'm going to turn off the K3 here. And so we're back to MMTTY. And before we get into MMTTY, let's see, let me get a spectrum display up so we can see a window. Oh, there we go. So now I'm using Win4 K3 Suite, and let's see here. So I'm just going to bring that up, and I'm going to zoom in on this. So lo and behold, I'm on a signal here. So I can tune around. This is the spectrum display of Win4 K3 Suite using LPPAN 2. So this is perfect. I'm going to turn this down here and just slide this down a little bit here. So we're tuned into a signal right there. But we're not decoding anything, as you can see, right? So the next thing we want to do in MMTTY is, whoa, let's see here. There we go. I've got to be careful because it'll move the screen around. We're going to go in MMTTY, we're going to go into Options, Set up MMTTY right here. And we get this dialog box. You don't need to change any of this. Don't touch any of this. Believe me now and hear me later. But we want to set the ham default mark and space tones to what we set up on the K3, which was 915 and 170. So I'm going to change this to 915, okay? And this is going to be the default because there'll be an auto frequency adjustment that goes on, and the software will automatically adjust to the tones a little bit, and we'll see that later. So set that to 915 and 170 right here, and then drop the current mark and shift down, set that to 915 and 170. Okay, if we click OK, we're still not going to decode anything here. Oh, another thing I wanted to do is make the font bigger. So we're going to go to Font window. I'm going to get in here. I'm going to jack the size of this font up bigger, make it bold. Okay, but we're still not decoding anything, right? And I'm going to turn the RF down to get rid of some of the noise that's coming through there. But we don't see a signal up here. And so we're still on step one. We want to receive an RTTY signal off the air and get it fed into MMTTY so it can decode it. So we've configured MMTTY to listen to the same tones that are configured on the K3, but now we need to get the audio as decoded out of the K3, the AF audio tones coming through the K3, like your voice or whatever, like a CW tone. We're going to send that analog signal actually from the K3 into the microphone input of a sound card. Now on the K3S it has a built-in sound card, but I could just as well use the line out on the back of the K3 and feed that into the line input or the microphone input on a regular sound card on the computer. I'm going to use the built-in sound card on the K3S. So that's the next thing we want to do. Let's go back to the options, set up MMTTY, and we're going to come over to the sound card, and by default, right, it's listening to me right now. I didn't even pay attention. If I talk, you're seeing up here, you're seeing actually my voice modulation because it's listening to my HD Pro webcam C920. And so we want the reception, which is the microphone. This is the codec or the sound card right down here, USB audio codec. That is a kind of ubiquitous codec sound card that the guys at Elecraft used because the drivers are built into Windows, and we won't get into that. But as soon as I click on the microphone there, I'm now selecting that input. For transmission, it really doesn't matter. I usually select the same codec even though we're not using FSK. So this has no bearing on FSK transmission. But I'm going to select that anyway just to match those up. We've got the microphone input on the USB audio codec sound card that's built into the USB connection into the K3S. And then I've got the transmission set to that. I mean, it would allow me to do FSK, but I'm not going there. So if I click OK, we should see something change here. And we did, right? So now we're seeing the mark and space tones here. And if there's a signal, if this guy transmits again, we should start to see a print here. Oh, there we go. Right there, QRZ, DE, OA4CN, OA4CN. Lima, Peru. I don't even know if he's in the contest, but I'm not even pointed his direction. But you can see the mark and shift tones right here are now being decoded by MMTTY. Now I just unclicked the net button, and I don't want to confuse anybody, but ATC and net should be off. We're going to be doing FSK. Really the only thing we need selected is automatic frequency control. So on the K3, let me go back to the K3 for a minute. And let's see here. Let me turn the K3 video back on. Right now I have the dual pass filter going. I'm going to turn that off with the X filter. If you hold it in, when you're in data mode on the K3, this will turn on the peak twin filters. I'm going to turn that off, and now I'm going to shut that display off. I'm going to go back to MMTTY here and zoom in. And so now you're seeing, I'm going to tune now, and hopefully that's working right there. I'm going to tune up to this other signal, so I'm tuning up the dial now. Or I could tune down to this, somebody's loud down here. So let's wait for that to come back if they were calling CQ. Right here. And so here you're seeing up here the mark in space, and then we should see the decode down here. If I turn the RF way down, then see, so somebody's calling CQ 85XD, 85XD CQ. And so he's working the contest there. And I think I've seen him a lot. He does a lot of RTTY. So I've got the RF way down. But typically in the contest, you're more open on the RF. So you can hear the white noise there in the signal. Now on the fly here, if I had the tones set up wrong on the K3, if I go back in and change the tones right to 21 and 25 like that, right? The software, it's not sending, it's sending 2125 to the software. The software set up for 19 or 915 and 170. It's not going to decode anything. And so let's go back, and I'm going to put it back on 915, and now you're going to see it decode again. Now the same holds true, right? If I go into the software and I go to the demodulator, if we go back to 2125, right? 2125 as the default. I'll try to get to that default in a minute. See, so even though everything sounds the same on the input with the 915 tones and the 170 tones, the software quit decoding. But if I switch the radio back to the right tones that match the software, we should start to see the decode again. Look at that, it's freaking amazing. See, so now it's decoding with the higher Mark tone. And I think Mark's on the right side. I should know that. Anyway, I guess it's low. Anyway, so again, if I want to go back to those, to me, that high tone's just harsh to listen to when you're listening for signals. Let's go back to 915. So I'm back in the radio, going back to 915 in the radio. I've got to go back in the software setup, and we're going to go to the demodulator again. We're going to set the mark to 915, ham default to 915. And lo and behold, it starts decoding again. Another March miracle. So, oh, back to the filter. So when he's working VE7 BEF right now, 85XD, you're going to live in infamy. 85XD on YouTube on my video here. But I don't have the twin filters on the K3S configured right now. So if you look at the waterfall up here, and we could also turn on the XY scope. You can see that we have like a CW bandwidth going on right here. So if I open up the bandwidth on the K3S, so you can see it's a wider receive here in the waterfall. If I pinch that down to 40 Hertz, you can see the mark and the space tones being decoded here. And we can also see the XY scope to fine-tune the receive. You want that horizontal and vertical so that you get the perfect copy. But I can also turn on those mark and shift peak filter by holding in the X filter button, which is the APF function. And you've noticed right now that all of a sudden we have the null between the mark and the shift. So I just turned that on the K3S. So now we've got that nice mark and shift. if we look down here on the spectrum display from the IF out on the K3S, you can see they're matched right up. Right here. So now I could come up here, I double click on this one up here, let's see who this is up here. So I just retuned to this frequency. So this is W7P. Let's see what's going on here. Not a whole lot right now. How about up here? Let's come up here. Just find somebody calling CQ again. Come on, guys. I'm messing with my demo. Where'd everybody go? Okay, there's somebody giving a report. A little lull in the action here. So that was KI5II, who just worked VE6TK. So VE6TK, my antenna's not pointed the right direction, but I mean, you get the idea, right? We're receiving RTTY signals and a 914 hertz mark and 170 hertz shift tone. Let's tune into this guy. There we go. So that was AA4DD. So he's calling CQ. So here he's calling CQ again. So I'll turn the RF way down. He's got a loud signal. See, we're not getting any, very little noise between transmissions. So N5KWN just called him. And so AA4DD is going to give him the exchange for BART G. Oh, he didn't copy his call. So N5KWN is going to go back. Call him again. AA4DD. Copied him this time. Give him 599. This is 369th contact, and the time is 2324 for BART G. That's the exchange. All right. Okay, I'm going to turn the AF down on the K3 here. Okay, I'm going to unzoom out. And so we have accomplished number 1. Receive audio in MMTTY. So that's kind of the fun part to start out with. The next 2 parts slip a lot of guys up, and that's where we've got to, from the software, on a Windows 10 64-bit operating system, we have to configure MMTTY to put that K3S into transmit and control the mark and space tones, okay? With another switch in effect that's going into the accessory port on the back of the K3S. And we'll see if I how motivated I am here to keep going. Let me keep going a little bit. I may take a break and then just edit the videos and put them together. I'm going to minimize the spectrum display from Winford K3 Suite here, and I want to show you, and I don't mean to scare anybody away, but I want to show you a cable that I made, and it's based upon the documentation, which I don't even know where it came from. AA5AU, Don has a ton of information on the internet about setting up RTTY and FSK. And, there's some simple circuits to do the PTT, and there's one that's a little more involved, and that's what I used. You can use either one. You can also use an opto-isolator with a single resistor to do the PTT and or control the FSK mark and shift tones. So let me just pull up a browser here, and I made these cables. I made several cables for several of the guys in a local DX club I belong to. And so I'm going to go to nc7p.com, downloads. This is a web server I run, ng7m. And oh, I meant to go to my, those are the raw files, my photo album. I'm going to go back to NG7M. I'm going to go here. I'll zoom in for you here, just so if you want to go reference these pictures. Let me zoom in for now. Okay, so now it's nice and big on that 4K output on YouTube there. So I think I've got a section down here called RTTY, and where is that? Right here, RTTY. So so here's a single op 1 VFO keying interface. Let me go to that first, and let's see if we can get a decent view of what I did here. Yeah, this is a better one. I made this one for a WR7Q, and let's make this big, big, big. If I can grab the handles there. Let's go to the original file. Okay, here we go. This is good. Okay. So here I built we need two switches. One switch to do the PTT on the K3S, one switch to do the FSK. And so I got a little more sophisticated for a Bob WR7Q here. I cut out some phenolic circuit board stuff here, right? And I actually crufted up the two keying circuits with the diode and the resistor and the transistor off of the two of the lines on a serial port. And we're not doing any data whatsoever. That serial port is not transmitting any data for FSK, nor is it receiving any data. We're simply using two of the lines, RTS and DTR, ready to send, and data terminal ready off the top of my head. We're going to use one of those for PTT, and we're going to use the other line to turn on and off those, I keep repeating myself, but the mark and shift tones. And the PTT is the same thing, right? We're going to turn on transmit on the K3S, or we're going to turn it off. It's on. It's a binary thing, on or off. One's going to be on and off periodically every time you transmit and receive. The other switch is going to be on and off rather fast to do the mark and shift tones to meet the baud 45 baud RTTY signal in our case. So that's what the interface looks like if you build it to go inside the DB9 hood. So it can be done. I'm in my 50s. Come on, guys, it's ham radio. You can build this. It's not that hard. And then I have a little label maker I put on here because I gave some of these out to the guys. So let me go back here. That's kind of what the cable looks like, all done up. And I even labeled it so this is upside down here, but I recommended, so I knew if I got calls from these guys, let's have TXD, transmit data. Sorry, I think I said DTS or DTR. We're going to have transmit data, do FSK keying, and then RTS will be the PTT. So I'll follow that same pattern in the demo here. So let me go back to this here. I wanted to go back to this cable. I'll show you now that I created is a single operator 2 VFO interface, and I got to give some credit to Don. I'm not going to get into the details here, but this interface is one connection to the K3S accessory port, but you feed it with two serial ports. So then I can have two copies of MMTTY running, one for each VFO. Or in the case of if you've got the second subreceiver in your K3, K3S, you'll have the main receiver as the left channel audio microphone input, and the subreceiver will be the right channel audio input into the microphone input on that codec, or it would be on your line out going into your sound card on the computer. So let's just look at this because I know I have a snapshot of the document where I made the interface. So here we'll just quickly look at this. This was the more of the Manhattan style crufted up. So this is on one end where I, let me get to, so here you can see I did a, here let's, yeah, hopefully I'm not scaring anybody away here. It's not that big of a deal. But let's make this a little smaller. Let's see. There we go. That's a little more manageable. So here I didn't use any PC board. I just crufted up the whole circuit. So you got a couple capacitors, a couple resistors, a couple diodes here. And again, these are just transistor-based switches. And we're using a transistor as a switch and nothing more. So there you can see it a little bit more. And look at that. It's beautiful, isn't it? I think I had to, do a little tape and stuff. So that's pretty hilarious. That's why I went to the PCB. Okay, so this is where I have two serial ports. This is getting a little more advanced here, but I have two serial ports feeding down the same lines. And thanks to Don, I put in some diodes here to make sure that when one serial port's got a line active, that voltage doesn't end up coming back down the other serial port line and vice versa. So the signals, right, the voltage only goes down to the K3. And more pictures of the interface. Okay, this is what I really wanted to show. And I think that's going to look pretty good on the 4K output there. So this is a page right out of K7X's Bible on the K3, K3S. And I'm not sure where he probably credited where this circuit came from. But it's a little more robust, right? It's got the diode to keep any voltage from, going the wrong direction, that type of stuff, and a capacitor to kind of smooth things out on the switching side of it, right? It's where you send the FSK in. So these are the two switches as far as the circuit's concerned. And I'm using two N3904 transistors. I just wrote these down in here. So here you've got the sophisticated ACC K3 port, pins 1 through 15, and then the 9-pin serial port. And you can see here on the serial port side, right, I'm using TXD's pin 3, ground is 5, RTS or DTR, I used RTS is pin 7, ground 5. On the K3 side, we're going for FSK switching. Again, this is just an on-off switch. It's an open circuit or it's a closed circuit. Open circuit, closed circuit. Is ACC pin 1 for FSK keying. And when it's closed, right, it's closed to ground. And then for PTT, it's ACC pin 4. Okay, and ground. Two switches. That's all it is. I swear that is like the hardest thing to explain about FSK, push to talk, or well, push to talk rather than anything to do with FSK. But then on the FSK side, you're just a switch on and off. The radio then says, oh, if it's on or off, I send out a mark or a shift tone. That's all I do. So anyway, a shameless plug for KE7X. I really bought his book, or a couple of them actually. Don't be copying them and floating around. I think it's well worth the money to buy his book. I think the circuit's also available inside the Elecraft K3, K3S manual too. It probably shows this too. So, all right, I'm going to minimize this, get this out of the way. And the next thing we want to do is talk about hooking that cable up and actually testing the push to talk and FSK keying on the K3S. But I've been yapping for quite a while here now, and I think I'm going to take a break, and then I'll be right back to keep going. We're going to get into number 2, and we're going to get into number 3, and then after that we get it all working. I'll fire up N1MM. We'll point N1MM to the instance of MMTTY that we set up, and we'll see if we can make N1MM plus control MMTTY, and we'll be in business. Maybe I'll make a few contacts. So give me a minute here. I'll go get a drink, and then I'll be back. So intermission. Welcome back. I took a little break there, so got something to wet the whistle. Soda. And we'll continue on. There during the break, I thought about you saw 85XD working some stations there in the Mark G, and I think I said that he would go down in infamy. That's not the proper term. He had a nice signal, nice strong signal, and I can almost assure you that Milt 85XD there was using FSK. I'd be shocked if he was using AFSK. It just didn't sound like it. They say AFSK, if you get it adjusted right, you can't tell a difference, but boy, I can always tell when they're certainly not adjusted correctly. But so Milt, he's down in Richardson, Texas. I looked him up, but apologies, Milt, if I infamy was the wrong word. You'll go down famously. You'll be famous in that video for the March 2018 Mark G. You're in my video there, working a couple guys there in the contest. So glad to have you on there. Glad the signals were there. So there's another thing I need to do before we get back into step number 2, controlling the PTT and the FSK. I forgot to talk about, which is not critical, but if you want to have the best decode possible, you want to make sure and set the bit rate of the sound card, the microphone, what it's listening on. You want that bit rate to be the same. Whatever it's set to, you want to match that in the software, because then in MMTTY, in this case, we're sticking to MMTTY. We're not going to get into the other software, FLDigi, or the other stuff. You really need to make sure, most guys don't even think about this, but you'll want to make sure that the bit rate setting on the microphone input to your sound card matches up to the bit rate setting in MMTTY, or at a minimum a multiple of the bit rate. So it'll just allow the slicing and dicing of the signals to match up better down at that digital level there inside the software. And so let's do that right now. I forgot to show that. Let's get me minimized down again. I'll turn on my desktop. There we are. Back to the screen here. And I'm going to minimize that and that. And we've got MMTTY here going again. Let me first, so you need to do this if you want to get the best decode in the software possible. So for the K3S, using its built-in sound card, I'm going to just go down and right-click on the little speaker in the taskbar on Windows and go to the recording devices. And I'll pull that over, and then I'm going to zoom in again. And so I'm on the recording devices here. I'm going to slide down to the microphone USB audio codec. That is the codec for the K3S. Double click on that. And by the way, the levels, this is probably up for debate. I don't get crazy on the microphone input. As you can see right here, I've got it on 24 out of 100. If you right click on the little speaker here, you can go to decibels. So I've got it minus 12.2. So you can play around with that and see how well you decode. I tend to not try to overdrive that microphone input from the K3. Anyway, a little digression there on levels. What I really came into here for was, first of all, I should have mentioned the levels. We need to have this set to something other than 0. So the audio from the K3 can be heard by the software. So it's a good thing I touched on that again. Excuse me, the main thing is the Advanced tab. So for MMTTY, if you want to match the bitrate exactly, you'll want to come in here and set the default format to 2-channel 16-bit 11025 hertz dictation quality. Don't get all hung up on, you're not going to get a better decode right at these higher bit rates. You can if you want, but just make sure you've got a multiple in the software or the matching bit rate in the software if you go higher. So right now I'm just matching them the same for this demo here. So make sure that's set to 11,025 hertz, okay, and click apply. Okay, and then back inside MMTTY in the options, set up an MMTTY, and I can never remember which tab this is on. And I think it's on the miscellaneous. Yes, it's on the miscellaneous window here. So go over to the miscellaneous window, and the clock here you want set to that same bit rate. Look at the docs online if you want to get into that, but if you want the best decode, that's what you got to do. So now if you didn't have 11,025 hertz on your sound card, you should at least select a multiple. Like you could select 48,000 hertz and then select 12,000 hertz here to get a multiple of that. You don't want to split them up or you're going to lose some ability on the decode. I mean, don't get too hung up on that, but just a hot tip there. The big boys, I'm sure, are making sure that that's matched up. So, okay, let's minus down here. Let me talk a little bit more about the cable. Remember I had the cable, the pictures we were showing there. And I think I'm going to pull that back up here. Let's see. Let's see, photos. Back to good old me here. And apologies, I should have had this ready. So back to the RTTY. I just want to look at this one cable here. So good, this is perfect. So this is a cable that I made for Dave, K7AHF, that lives not too far from me. And man, he got the metal DB9 hoods. So he got, you know, fancy or something. So you don't see the ends here. So the I can't, you know, one of these is the this is the serial side, because I can see right here it's the female serial side of it, right, to go into the serial port on the computer, whether that's a USB serial port or an actual serial port from a PCIe card that's in there. I actually use a external 8-port serial card made by VSCom. You can find those used on eBay now and then for, don't pay more than about 50 or 60 bucks, but they're really nice because they use the FTDI chipset. So you have one USB connection to your computer and then 8 physical ports there that are FTDI chipsets. They're the real deal. I use the latest FTDI drivers for Windows 10, 64-bit, and that's what I use. And then there's blinking lights, and we can never have enough blinking lights in our shack. So this is the serial side, and I labeled these up. And then this is the K3, K3S side. So this plugs into the accessory port, or if you have, okay, this is N6 TV, you're gonna get a shameless plug here, Bob. And so if you have one of these, right, you can split out the ACC port, the accessory port on your K3, K3S. So you have, you know, one port in, and then you get 4 ACC ports here, which is really nice for having everything hooked up at once. You don't have to have a bunch of Y splitters behind the K3, K3S. So that's what I use. Again, just Google up the Y box by N6 TV. Bob. It's Bob. I hope I got your name right there. I'll see if I sell you. you can buy me a, get me a glass of water or something. Anyway, really slick to deal with, manage multiple connections to the ACC port. It does a lot more than that too, but so back to this here. I'll make this small again. So you're going to have a serial port, right, connected to one end coming out of your computer. The other end plugs into the ACC input onto the back of your K3S or through a Y splitter. And we're only, for this connection here, we're only using push to talk. And the serial side here, if the serial line RTS ready to send goes high or has a voltage on it, it'll saturate that transistor in effect and close the switch. And then the other input to the accessory port on the K3, K3S, we're going to use TXD to do the same exact thing. If the transmit data line goes higher, has a voltage on it, it's going to saturate the semiconductor material in the transistor and turn that thing, it's going to act like a switch. It'll allow for a very low current to flow through on the other side there to ground, right? And the K3 will know that you've closed that circuit, whether it's push to talk or FSK. And the serial port, the software will control the serial port, specifically on the TXD line, turning it on and off to generate the proper flip back and forth between the mark tones and the shift tones as appropriate to create the tones to generate the letters and numbers to transmit the RTTY signal at the speed that we've selected. So that's what I have hooked up to my computer. You'll need to figure out which serial port you're talking to, and a lot of guys will pull up the device manager. I'll pull it up here, and let me zoom in on this. Just double check. And if you come in and you expand your COM and serial ports and LTP ports, you'll see all your serial ports. And when you unplug your FTDI USB serial port, you'll see the COM port number disappear. When you plug it back in, it'll reappear. And you can also get into these ports and renumber them. And I'm not going to get into all the details there, but you'd go to port settings, generally look at the driver, you want FTDI, you want the later drivers. But you can change the COM port ID, the number. And you go to the port settings, you go to advanced, and here you could change which COM port that particular device is set to. Hey, here's a hot tip too. Uncheck the serial enumerator. If you've got a real FTDI serial port, it won't key any of those lines. None of those lines will go high when you boot up the computer, and a lot of guys get heartburn over that because it'll key the K3 or K3S when you boot up Windows, because it's, the software's putting a signal on those lines, and if it's hooked up to your PTT, it's going to kick that on. So uncheck those. Anyway, a little digression there onto the serial ports. You need to know which serial port you've got plugged in, and then you need to know, let me go back, zoom back out here. You need to know what you're going to use for PTT, which line, RTS, TXD. That's how I built my cable. So when you build the interface, you could just as well use a breakout box here if you have big fingers like the size of sausages or whatever, and you don't want to build the circuit inside the DB9. Just do a breakout box, build the circuit, but make sure you remember what you set up for the PTT line and the FSK line. RTS, PTT, TXD, FSK in my case. All right. So, all right, let's go. I've got my cable hooked up. I know what serial port it's on. I actually have two serial ports going to my K3, so I can do single operator 2 VFOs. So I have COM 7 and COM8 that are plugged into the accessory port through a Y box on the back of my K3S in this case. So finally, we are back to setting up 2 and 3, and they'll happen kind of at the same time here if all the planets are lined up and everything's good to go. So let me zoom in again here, and I've got my cable hooked up. I know it's COM7, and I'll just, for demonstration purposes here, I'll just use COM7. And I know, again, back to the, because I have a short memory, back to the cable, RTS is PTT, TXD is FSK. And let's go into the settings in MMTTY. Options, settings, and this will trip some guys up here too. So we're going to be talking through using external FSK keying because we're dealing with a 64-bit operating system here. And without getting into the details there's reasons why it's a little trickier in a 64-bit OS. There's software does not have the capability to preempt other processes. And so the workarounds for 64-bit OS, some smart guys created this external FSK DLL API that MMTTY uses to facilitate PTT and FSK. And so go back into the, so we've got all our details. We know which COM port we've got. We're going to use our RTS for PTT and TXD for FSK. We come into setup, and nothing on the first screen will change. Nothing on the second screen will change. Nothing. Don't start messing around here. Read up on it before. Decode, the third tab, nothing changes. Now the transmit tab, we'll make some changes, okay? Well, wait a minute here. Actually, we won't make any changes, I do believe. Come to the miscellaneous tab, and that's been a while since I did this. So the PTT FSK port, I'm going to pick as COM7. Okay, and I think that, so I think we do need to change that on the TX tab, because then that enables some settings over here on the miscellaneous tab. So apologies there. So nothing on the first 3 tabs. If you're decoding, fine. In the first part of my video, you don't need to change anything there. But on the transmit tab, don't worry about all this other stuff here. Yada yada yada. It's this upper right hand corner. Select the COM port that you're going to use for your keying interface that we talked about earlier. Set it, in my case, it's COM7. Okay, then come over to the miscellaneous tab, and you want to select the TX port as COM TXD FSK. All right, and once you select that, this USB port pops up, and I've really never had any problems with A, but because this says C, limiting speed seems to be well down here, I usually select C, and it seems to be fine. So click OK, and oh. See, so this is why guys get confused, because it's been a while since I've done this. I need to go back into the settings. On the PTT and FSK, I'm not thinking. So go, so don't feel bad if this gets confusing. Go to the TX tab, and at the bottom of the list here, there's 2 additional options after COM64. You have external FSK and external FSK 64-bit if you're using a 64-bit operating system. Now, so we're going to select that. Let me jump out. It's all included with MMTTY 1.7.0. So remember, I downloaded the latest version, 1.7. So again, back in here. I'm not going to edit this. You just get what you get here. Um, you get what you get for free. Go to the Transmit tab, PTT and FSK, scroll all the way to the bottom. If you have a 64-bit operating system, select External FSK 64. Okay, come over to Miscellaneous, select COM, USB port, limiting speed. Okay, now we're not done yet. When I click OK, I'm going to zoom out here. This is a little tricky here too. I'm going to zoom out on MMTTY. When I selected the external FSK option and clicked OK, there's this mysterious little window that popped up, which was up over here in the left side. You can minimize this, get it out of the way. Normally you don't worry about it after you've set it up, but we need to configure that to select the right COM port and which serial lines we're going to use for FSK and PTT. So let me go through that again. I know this is laborious. Just pause and rewind or skip ahead if I'm boring you to death. Originally, I should have said you go to Options, Setup. Nothing on the first three tabs changes. Go to the TX tab. We're going to use external FSK 64. Drop this down all the way to the bottom. Go to the Miscellaneous tab. Switch it from Sound to COM, TXD, FSK, USB port. You can try normal, or again, I usually do limiting speed. Click OK. Click OK. That window is going to show up in the upper left-hand corner if it's a brand new install up here. Drag the window over. I'll zoom in now. We're getting there. We're getting really close. So up until this point, we have not selected the COM port. Okay. We are now going to select the USB COM port, which was COM7 from the earlier discussion, because we're going to have MMTTY open that port, COM7. If no other software is using that port, this little window, you should see status OK. So now we need to select our push to talk output, okay, which was RTS, right? RTS. I can double check here in my little diagram. So RTS was PTT right there. TXD is FSK. Those are just two lines on a serial port that the software can turn on and off. Nothing to do with transmitting the serial data. Nada. We're just going to have those lines control those transistor-based switches we created in our interface cable. Okay, zooming back in. So PTT, RTS, FSK, TXD, and we minimize this. Okay, now, if the planets are truly lined up, let's get our spectrum scope back up here. We'll find another, I just don't want to transmit on a signal. Of course, you could go into a dummy log. So I've got the AF, I'm turning the AF back up on the K3S here. And okay, so if I tune, here I'm going to zoom in on the screen. There's a signal right here, so if I tune on that signal, that's JH1 RFM. I'm not, he's off the, like the back of the beam there. Oh man, let's see here. So he just worked, or K7PU just worked him. Anyway, we know we're receiving. And so I want to tune off, find a clear frequency, because I'm going to test transmit. So if everything's hooked up right now, I can come up in MMTTY. Whoa. Zooming the window there is a little precarious. Zoom back in. Okay. So if I click on transmit, we should hear what guys refer to as the RTTY diddle. So here we go. And lo and behold, it keyed the radio and it started transmitting. So no data. I could start typing data down here. And so if I unclick the transmit button and it stops, we know two things just happened. I was correct, right? I got the line for the PTT push to talk working. The cable was made up correctly. It's hooked up to the accessory port correctly for the PTT input. So it was pin 7 off the top of my head. And the FSK line on the serial port is hooked up to the circuit, and it's keying FSK on the radio because I'm in data FSK digital on the K3S. So pretty cool, right? Everything's actually working right now. However, you're probably not going to be so lucky. So let's see what happens if we get that wrong. So if I zoom out, if I go into the external FSK window here, the little window that handles the mysteries of a preemptive operating system like Windows 10, which is a good thing. If we selected, FSK as, if we reverse these, let's say we put FSK as RTS and push to talk as TXD, we're going to hear some weird stuff now if I try to transmit. So let me zoom in again. So again, I just flipped them around. I just set the RTS to the FSK output and TXD to push to talk. So I'm going to minimize that. Now if I push transmit, you're not going to hear the nice diddle. You're going to hear push to talk acting like it's in a diddle mode. Can you hear that? It's keying my radio as though it's sending a mark and a space. And if I start typing, can you hear that? I've got a relay into a DX Engineering NCC2 every time I key, so I don't overload some receive antennas I have. So now we've got FSK going into the PTT, so you can see what happens when you get those wrong. So I thought I'd demo that. So that's not a good thing, right? So I just stopped transmitting, and I'm going to go back, pull up the little external FSK window, and I'm going to get it right here. We've got FSK on the TXD line. And you can't have them both. You can't have PTT and FSK on the same line, so it automatically selected RTS for the PTT. Now you can actually invert the PTT or FSK here if you want. If I invert PTT, it's gonna do a push to talk, right? Push to talk. So that's one way to test your push to talk. So then you can test the FSK tones too. So there's Mark. There's a space, Mark, space. You can see it on the screen. So you can see how putting voltage on that TXD line is sending the signal to the K3 to either do a mark or a space tone. Back and forth there, see it? And so you can kind of use these two checkbox here to test things out. But normally you shouldn't have to invert those at all, but it allows you to test it if you've got the right COM port and everything's happy as far as your circuit's concerned. The voltage levels are causing the transistor to be a switch. So now, a little advanced thing here, I set up a single radio 2 VFO interface, so I can use either COM port. And this will be important later on. If I select COM 8, it's the same cable going to the K3, and it'll still work. See, it's gonna key, and then the mark and shift tones are working on either COM port. And just remember that for later. But if you're just doing a single radio, or a single operator, single VFO, or if you're SO2R, you'd have completely separate circuits, right? I have two COM ports wired into the same interface for the K3. Hopefully I'll get into that later when we get into when we get into N1MM plus. So I'm going to go back to COM7. Okay, test it again. See, it's keying. You can hear it. If I leave it keyed, I'm transmitting like right here. Should be in a dummy load. But then I can test the tones too by just with the invert FSK tone. See? Shift, mark, shift, or mark shift. You know, don't be gentle if I got that backwards, you gurus out there. That might be the mark because it's the higher tone, right? 915 hertz. And that's the shift, the 170. So anyway, leave those unchecked. Minimize this window. And we're in business, right? I can transmit and receive. So if I start transmitting, I guess I could have done a QR or a QRL, but I didn't. And then I turn the transmit off. All right, cool. We're in business. So the next thing we're going to do is, now I debated whether to start with DXLab and Wind Warbler or N1MM plus and MMTTY. I think I'm going to go right to N1MM plus, and I'll get into the nitty gritty, and this causes a lot of guys a lot of consternation. There's confusing things in there. And once you kind of understand what's going on, it's not bad at all. But I'm going to take another break, and then we're going to get into N1MM. So if you made it with me this long, you may as well stick around for a little while longer. So see you in a few minutes. And signing off for now. Well, if you made it this far, you're a glutton for punishment. You're back for more. And now I'd like to get into N1MM, and we'll kind of tie everything together, and we'll see if we can make some contacts in part G. By this time, I think a lot of the activities moved to 40 meters. There's only about another hour and 15 minutes in the contest, so hopefully I can wrap it up here and tie it all together. Just keeping it simple again, we're going to configure N1MM plus to use the instance of MMTTY that I installed in the beginning of the video. And then we'll make sure everything behaves correctly, right? N1MM plus is going to use the API interface into MMTTY and control MMTTY. So MMTTY is doing the heavy lifting, right, as far as keying, using the PTT to key the K3, K3S, and then also taking the text data stream in effect from N1MM plus and converting that into the mark and shift tones that you hear over the air. So I purposely have N1MM plus kind of misconfigured. My previous installs of MMTTY, I renamed the directory, so it will have a problem. It won't know where MMTTY is when we go in to configure it. I've already configured N1MM plus for the BART-G contest, but we'll focus on that interface. We know standalone that MMTTY, the one that we installed, can transmit and receive, and the external FSK 64 configuration is correct for our interface cable, or for my interface cable that I made to control the FSK and PTT from a serial port, FTDI chipset serial port, and just to keep that simple. So on the desktop here, let's minimize me again, stick me back in the corner. I'm gonna be pretty small here, small. And so let's see, let's get the spectrum display up. A little eye candy there. And I'm actually going to turn on a UDP broadcast so we can use the spectrum display inside N1MM Plus, which is nice. Win4 K3 Suite here. A little digression here. It'll pump out it's actually not that much data once you start thinking about it, but it'll pump out a broadcast as a UDP data, and N1MM can listen to that and duplicate the spectrum display here in one of its own windows. So I'm going to turn that on right there at that checkbox. And if you can see that on 4K, it's going to be tough to see that. So I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to fire up right over there. There's the N1MM Plus icon. We're going to fire that up. And just to be sure, I terminated the previous version of MMTTY, because you can't have, that's already got the COM7 in my case opened up, so I shut that instance down, because now N1MM will control starting and stopping a particular instance of MMTTY. So we're going to open up N1MM Plus, and it's starting up. Okay, and I've got a connection to DX cluster. NC7J actually runs on a server right next to me here. A little more digression here. We're getting some RTTY spots on the telnet interface up here. And if I try to open up the digital window right now, digital interface window, here I'll zoom in. Just trying to make sure. So if we've got a window, digital interface, should get, well, it didn't give an error, but it switched things over to MMTTY, which is another software interface you can use to do RTTY. And for me, it's been much easier to kind of get guys to cut their teeth with MMTTY at first, and then if you want to use some of the other software decoding programs that are out there, you can, look at FLDigi and the MMTTY, that type of thing. But right now, it's not configured. I'm in a contest, an RTTY contest, right? If I go to open log, I've selected the Bart's G RTTY up here, and but I don't have. How do I get MMTTY configured and interfaced with N1MM? That's what we're going to do right now. So I'm going to unzoom again, back out to the big screen. I'm going to actually shut down the digital interface window that came up, because it doesn't know about MMTTY right now. N1MM doesn't, rather. So I'm going to shut that down. And here I'll zoom in again. And I think I'm going to move these over here a little bit. All right, there. That's my checked log window. I don't have anything too organized here, but so the first thing we want to do, now that we're in an RTTY contest, I can type in RTTY and make sure the radio is in the data mode. And oh, this is good. So this is where it shows you're not configured right. I can't find the configuration for MMTTY, which I used to have set up, but I renamed the directory, so I can't find it. So it's going to pull up the default interface that comes with N1MM Plus, which is MMTTY, which I've used before too. They're both good. So I'm going to close the window again, and now we're going to go where a lot of HEMs don't want to go, to the configuration of N1MM Plus. And this very first hardware tab, guys, you get for MMTTY, you're going to get really hung up on this. You do not need to change anything here. If you've got your rig interface set up and you have like a WinKeyer set up, I've got WinKeyer on COM10, the CAT interface, cable automated, control to the K3S is on COM20 here. There, you do not need to select digital here. Don't touch any of this. Okay? You don't need it for MMTTY. You then need to go to digital modes, and this is another screen that guys just start clicking and gyrating around. Don't do it. Just, get your teeth cut on MMTTY, in my opinion, or once you understand these concepts, you can set the other stuff up FLDigi, or use the built-in MMVARI with N1MM plus, either way. So digital interface number 1 over here, leave it at sound card. Don't change this, no need. Digital interface 2, sound card, don't touch it. There's no reason to set anything there. Oh, one thing I forgot, I'm going to cancel out here. If I go back to, that's right, the first tab, sorry, I could have stayed in there. The hardware tab, I have it set for single operator, 1 VFO, just to keep it simple here. So we will only have 1 digital interface. So again, you don't need to touch anything here. You don't need to check these, okay? Click on the digital modes. Leave these alone. Leave these alone, okay? Digital interface number 1, MMTTY setup if used. We are using FSK, so you want to make sure FSK is set there. And now we want the path to where we installed MMTTY. This is my pre-demo path, the old path that it couldn't find. So remember, I did a clean install at the beginning of the video. We are going to go in to, if you remember, so I'm on drive C here on my Windows 10 desktop. I'm going to go to apps. Oops, wrong one. It's under ham. That was the default. MMTTY, MMTTY number 1, and there it is, MMTTY.exe. And I'm going to click on that. And for the second digital interface, I mean, I could actually just blank that out. And that's it. That's it, guys. If you're doing a single operator, single VFO, that's all you need to select. You don't have to mess around with the MMVARI stuff down here. Just, don't start clicking and, everything. That's all you need to do. You don't have to specify a COM port. You don't have to specify PTT. You don't have to specify anything but FSK and the path to where you installed MMTTY. Okay? And I should be good to go now. If I click OK, shouldn't get any errors. I should now be able to go to the window, digital interface, and it's still on MMVARI, but I'm going to change to the interface up here in the digital interface sound card. This is confusing kind of, right? I'm going to change the interface to MMTTY now. So digital interface, we want MMTTY. Click MMTTY. It'll close that down. Lo and behold, what you're going to see is it pops up the RTTY engine, and it's using an API into MMTTY, right? And you'll also notice, let's just slide this over here. It's going to be the best way here. Resize these windows a little bit. I'm going to unzoom out here. You'll also notice once I switch that interface, the focus is coming back here. Hang on. I just got to rearrange the windows here. So I'm going to put my window for my copy down here, and then my decoder window right here. And all of this is coming, it's already configured. Since I set everything up in MMTTY externally and then pointed to that instance, we're ready to rock and roll. I mean, it's already decoding, right? And so I can also turn on the spectrum display, because remember I enabled the UDP feed from Win4K3 Suite. And so we'll pull up, this is the native N1MM spectrum display, which is really cool. It's one of the latest and greatest features in N1MM. And so you can see down here, let's see if I can get things arranged so I can zoom in and see everything. Shut that off. Okay. So before we make any contacts here, I'm going to zoom in again. And so we've got the RTTY engine here, options. This is going to look oddly familiar now. So if I click on, we can clearly see that we're in, you can change the colors of all this, by the way, but we can go into setup here and you're going to see that exact same configuration dialog that we saw when we opened up the settings directly in MMTTY. So the demodulator, the mark, and the shift are set to, it's actually 915 and 170, but the automatic frequency control adjusts that dynamically. And the default is 915 and 170. All the settings are going to be the same. If we go to transmit C, external FSK is selected here. Miscellaneous, it's COM TXD FSK. USB port is limiting speed. The sound card is the K3S USB audio codec. And this here does not matter. We're doing FSK. Whatever you have selected in the transmission side here, I'm repeating myself. It doesn't matter. I just picked the USB audio codec because because it matches them up. So now I click OK. We're ready to go. N1MM Plus can talk to MMTTY. MMTTY is decoding down here. So let's find a station to work. And I can test and click on transmit here and see if I'm keying the radio. I don't hear anybody on this frequency. Everything's good to go on my station. So look at that, I'm transmitting. There's the diddly 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 there. And if I come down here and type in manual keying, you can see it's, so I just transmitted that. And then I stopped keying. I hit escape, or I could have clicked up here. Turn that down. You can control the font size here in, I'm going to zoom out now. So we know it's transmitting. Let's double check to make sure we're receiving it. These little, in a lot of the N1MM Plus windows, you can change the font size by clicking these buttons here, which is pretty slick. See, so it's making the font bigger there. I'm going to make it pretty big so you can see it without me needing to zoom in. Hopefully you'll be able to see. So if I come down to my spectrum display window here, okay, and I click on a signal, so it moved the frequency here. So here you got somebody sending their exchange right here. So here's the other side of the conversation. So KG5LRP just worked WS4V, and I've already worked KG5LRP. So we'll find somebody I haven't worked here. I'll come click up on, see who this is. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to, so somebody's calling CQ, W8, oh, I've worked him too. How about, I worked more guys on 40 meters last night. Anyway, in the meantime, I got to turn on the blower, turn on the amplifier here, get it in operate. Okay, I haven't worked VA3LR, so I've got my transmit power right here. Right, so I'm in search and pounce, and VA3LR is working W7 WSV right now. or W7WSV is calling VA3LR. So here's VA3. He's sending him his report. And we'll, as soon as we're ready here, I'm going to work WA3LR. In the meantime, I can tune, you know, right on frequency, get the XY display up here, a nice horizontal and vertical lines. So let's see. He's still sending him his report. His contact number 194, and the time is 0101 Zulu. And the W7WSV's exchange is 87 contacts, 0102 Zulu time. Okay, we're going to call him. So I just called him at about 1300 watts. Sent NG7M. He just came back with NG7M. He gave me his report, 195. I click 195. Oops. And then the time fills in the display up here, and I send my exchange. NG7M. Oops. Got it confused there. Here's the exchange, VA3LR 599, contact 166, serial number 166-0103. NG7M, thank you, VA3LR, QRZ. So there's full circle. We made it. What has it been, going on an hour and a half later? So there you go, folks. You've got N1MM interfaced with MMTTY. So I'm going to do one other thing here real quick. I'm going to shut down N1MM. Oh, I didn't log him. Should have logged him. Okay, logged him. I shut down N1MM. Okay, everything's shut down. I'm going to pull up, I'm going to set up single operator 2 VFO. And I'm going to go kind of fast here, so skip this if you're happy with the single VFO. So I'm going to go back to ham, MMTTY, MMTTY1. I'm going to copy this whole install. I'm going to select everything here. I'm going to go back a directory. I'm going to make another directory called MMTTY number 2, Y2. I'm going to paste the contents in here. So now I've got a copy. So I have two copies. I've got MMTTY1 with the full set of files, MMTTY2 with a full set of files. I'm going to come back on MMTTY1 and I'm going to run MMTTY1 direct again, and I'm going to set it up to only listen to the left channel coming out of the the microphone input to the internal USB sound card. I'm going to tell MMTTY this instance, this install number 1, to only listen to the left channel. Okay, so go to the setup, go to miscellaneous, and the source I'm going to set to left right here. Okay, I'm going to shut it down. Shut it down. I'm going to then go to the second one, start it up, and I've got to do two things here. I've got to change it to listen to the right channel, but I also have to change it to PTT and send the FSK details on a different COM port. It's got to be a separate COM port. Okay, go to options, set up MMTTY, go to miscellaneous, right channel. Okay. However, there's going to be a new, I'm going to have to unzoom here. Unzoom. There's going to be another little mysterious window here. Right now, that second instance is still set up for COM 7. I shut down the first instance of MMTTY. I'm going to change this one to COM 8. But the TXD and RTS are the same, so I can test the PTT. I'll change the frequency. See, it's still keying. If I key, I can switch back and forth between the mark and shift tones. So I know it's working on COM 8. I minimize this, and then I shut it down. This is a whirlwind. I'm going to go back into N1MM. Okay. Okay, so it's set up with the first interface, which is fine and dandy, right? I can transmit still. You can hear that. Turn the monitor up a little bit. Okay, but now I'm going to configure for single operator 2 VFOs. Okay. So I'm switching to single operator 2 VFO. And I'll just click OK again. I probably could do it all in one fell swoop. So now I've got that second VFO. I'm going to go back into the configuration. Turn the AF down there. I'm going to go back to digital modes. MMTTY number 2, the path isn't set, but I've got FSK set here. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go to that second path. Remember, I copied. I'm going to select MMTTY. So now I have 2 instances of MMTTY. I'm going to click OK. And if I open up the second digital interface, we should get 2 digital interfaces now. Okay, how come I don't have 2 digital interfaces? Let's see. 1. I probably did something wrong in here. Let me double check. Single operator 2 VFO, digital modes. Everything looks good. I'm going to restart N1MM. I maybe needed to reopen that VFO, but we'll just restart N1MM here. Okay. Okay, we've got the first one going. Interface. No. Ooh, I may be doing a little break here to figure out what I've got set up wrong, because I clearly have something set up wrong for that second digital interface. Okay. Oh, there we go. I just had to kick the second VFO into RTTY. So now I'll put it over here. So now you've got to manage all these windows. So now I have 2 RTTY engines going. Right, so I have, this is not very organized here, but I now have VFO-B right here. Make the font a little bigger here. And it's listening to the second VFO, right? So if I turn on my subreceiver and get it in the, let's see, I should be able to, oh, I've got to make sure my subreceiver is set up for the right mode. Data mode is right. The width looks good. So I'm coming up here. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is getting two signals decoding at the same time. Wait, there's more. If the segue into this segment was because I had a problem setting up the dual VFO receive on left and right channels, and I probably should have left this out of the demo because I was trying to keep it basic with just one instance of MMTTY. But in that segment before I get into the setup for DXLab and Wind Warbler, I I couldn't get the receive going on the left and right channels, and the reason was because of the sound card. So if I pull up the sound card here, recording devices, I thought I had this selected correctly before, but if you go to the USB codec here, double click on it, I had on the advanced tab, I had the single channel 16-bit 11,025 hertz input selected. So I had it selected to this right here, so you're going to get one channel which pumps the same audio from the K3 into both left and right. So that's why I was seeing the same decode on both left and right channels. So it was just a matter of taking this, let me zoom in, taking this and the microphone properties for the USB codec, changing that to 2-channel. I must have done that early on, 2-channel, 11,025 hertz. And then you've got the K3, then you've got 2 different audio feeds going into the left channel on the microphone input there and the right channel, you know, a different audio, one on each channel. So now here you can actually see, I'll leave the screen zoomed in here, move these over a little bit. You can see you got N6RO here calling CQ on the VFO-A, on the sub receiver. Well, I have not worked N6RO. You've got K9QVB, who I have worked on the second receiver. So I may as well throw in working N6RO here, give him another contact. So I just called him. See if you can hear me off the back of the beam there. That looks like NF0N is calling him too. So he worked one of us there. Oh, he worked NF0N. I'm going to reverse my beam. So we'll call him here. Oh, I was on the wrong VFO. That might help. I was calling on the wrong frequency. So now he's working KM4F. KM4F sends his exchange. And N6RO calls CQ. Calling N6RO. He comes right back to me. This is my exchange. Click on the serial number. Serial number and time, hit enter. Send my exchange back to him, and he'll put me in the log. Okay, so there you go. There's the demo on the left and right channel, the single operator 2 VFO, and boy, did I screw up there too. I'm on a roll. I was calling on VFO-B. I was trying to call N6RO, and the other station is probably saying we've worked before or tried to work me anyway. Anyway, it's all good in the end. This video will be inserted before I segue into the DXLab Wind Warbler configuration. So stay tuned. You've got DXLab and Wind Warbler coming. Bye. Right there. So I'm gonna shut down N1MM. And it's shutting down here. I'm going to pull up DXLab. Okay, now I don't have DXLab set up to launch Wind Warbler by default. And so while it's starting up, I'm going to pull up a browser, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing that I did with N1MM. When you install Wind Warbler with DXLab, it installs a copy of MMTTY in the Wind Warbler directory. So I installed DXLab off my root on drive C here, So I'm going to go to DXLab. I'm going to go to the Wind Warbler directory. I do not have Wind Warbler running right now, but I'm not going to use an instance of MMTTY that I installed for N1MM. I'm going to actually just use the one that was delivered by the install of Wind Warbler. You could copy the latest version into this directory, but I think the later updates of Wind Warbler update MMTTY for you automatically. So I'm going to run it here. So I'm in. So if I zoom in, I'm in the DXLab Wind Warbler directory. I'm running out of gas on my demo here clearly. I'm going to double click MMTTY here. And we just want to configure it just like we did before. So I'm going to check UOS. I'm going to then go in to, it's obviously receiving on the right sound card right now here because I've got a signal. But I'm going to go to options, set up MMTTY. The mark and shift are set correctly. Nothing needs to be changed here. Nothing needs to be changed here. On transmit, I have external FSK already selected. Okay, just like the setup for N1MM. The font and the window, you know, is already big. I'm happy with that. If I go to miscellaneous, I can see that I have my clock set for 11,025 Hertz that matches the setting on the codec, USB codec. The bit rate there. I've got COM TXD selected. USB port, limiting speed. The sound card is set up for the microphone USB audio codec. And here it does not matter, but I can match it up there if I want. That wasn't set to the USB audio codec. So we are good to go here. I can test the transmit. I'm going to get off this guy's frequency, and we'll just test to make sure we get a... let me unzoom. Pop up the external FSK window. It fires it up just like it does with N1MM. It's configured for COM8, which is fine. So PTT is working. If I hold PTT in, invert the FSK, it's working. Minimize that, shut down MMTTY, turn my AF down. I come back up here to DXLab Launcher, and I'm going to launch Wind Warbler right here. I'm going to launch that, then I'll zoom in. Wind Warbler is coming up now. It's taking its time there. Okay, Wind Warbler is up, and I do have it set up for actually left and right channels using the DI interface. I won't get into that, but I just wanted to show you here that Wind Warbler is actually using the API of MMTTY, and so you get the XY scope here, and you also get the you know, the mark and shift little display here going on. So if I find there was a signal there, if I pull up the spectrum display, bring that up here, get on a so you can hear somebody doing an exchange. I'm going to zoom in. So we're decoding on MMTTY, and even the DI, I've got something goofy where the left and right audio is not working right, but that's an advanced feature. Maybe I'll cover that in another video. But I'm going to just show you how I can transmit. I'll unzoom here. Make sure I'm not on somebody's frequency right here. And then I'll just, you know, throw out my call sign here. So I'm in Wind Warbler. I'm going to click the call button here. It'll send my call sign 2 times. So you can hear me transmitting. Keys up, does FSK. And we are good to go in Wind Warbler 2. So you're a trooper if you made it this far. I apologize for the left and right channel. Still on N1MM Plus, but that should be easy to figure out. If you're new to FSK and RTTY, jump around in the video, go back, replay areas that you might feel are helpful, and I'll get this posted on YouTube, and hopefully somebody will find it helpful. And the next time somebody needs to set up their K3, K3S with N1MM or Wind Warbler, I can refer them to this video, and you can slow it down, speed it up, jump around, and do whatever you like. So 73 for now, and have a good rest of the weekend here, which isn't much left. 73 for now, NG7M. Bye.